Thank you so much.
WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina, 1037 on your dial, and globally at WPVMFM.org.
Now's the time for all good men to get together with one another.
Good afternoon, Asheville. This is Yes You Can radio show with Ann-Lee Waite. I am your host. It's a mysterious kind of overcast day, but it's a little cool, so it's wonderful, just cooling us off from that heat. You are listening to the new WPVM Low Power Community Radio Station, 103.7 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. Online, you can find us at WPVMFM.org, and we are live on our Facebook group, WPVM 103.7 Community Radio, featuring the arts and culture of Asheville. That's our group on Facebook. And if you check us out on Facebook, Davyne and I did not make agreements about what we were going to wear. We just happened to be in synergy with each other today. Yes? So my desire is for the words that you hear, that the words that are spoken today, that they bless you and they bring you value, they bring you some understanding. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. That is from Dr. Maya Angelou. Before, when I was laughing in the midst of saying Maya's quote, the reason why I was laughing is because Davyne is telling me that I have not the right mic. Not the right lever up, so that when you start talking, when I don't hear anything, I know exactly why, right? I'm having this tutorial because I'm kind of a little bit nervous. I've been doing the show now for over 3 months, but I've never had you, Davyne, as my guest, so I'm a little tiny bit nervous.
Well, I have my ruler here, and I will smack your wrist.
Do you know that when we were living in Bermuda when I was a child, I thought about doing piano lessons, but when I went to go and see the piano teacher, and she would take a wooden ruler and she'd smack your knuckles when you hit the wrong key, so I never went back. I don't think that kind of learning does me good at all.
I'm not good at that kind of learning either. Manuals and smacking me on the knuckles. That's not my.
Those are the two.
Those don't get me. Visual like a
Uh-huh.
video,
Uh-huh.
YouTube is like a wonderful learning curve.
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course, you already have to bring in technology into the conversation,
See what
right?
you did?
See? Okay. So let me get through the beginning now. So the topic that most excites me is how do we shift from survival mode to thriving mode? How can we live better, living better in our bodies, living better in our minds, hearts, and spirit? How do we rechart our course if the direction we are headed isn't empowering or life affirming? Yeah? It's important to know how to be able to shift gears and how to go on a different track, how to be able to assess that, you know what, this isn't taking me where I want to be going, and being self-responsible for that. Yeah? My guest today is the executive director of WPVM 103.7 FM, Davyne Dial. From 1982 to 2012, when she retired, Davyne worked as a professional designer. Davyne began her professional career as a designer in New Orleans, developing and operating a business in the French Quarter adjacent to Jackson Square. She relocated to Asheville in 1989. Davyne distributed her designs to exclusive retail shops and catalogs nationwide. Her work appeared in national magazines and graced the display windows of Saks Fifth Avenue's flagship store on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Upon retiring from the design world, Davyne fulfilled a dream of attending Penland School of Craft to study fine metalwork. She hopes to resume her metalwork once the station is well established in the community. She feels the opportunity to help develop WPVM from a dormant radio station is a thrilling challenge, and she's honored to be a part of developing the station to its fullest potential for the community. So I got to start backwards and come forward into the present, right? So in 1982, you decided to become an entrepreneur. And so what is it about entrepreneurship that appealed to you, that going and working for somebody else? Because some people think that job security is being hired by somebody else and allowing them to worry about getting them paid.
I was earlier in my life, I was always kind of envious of the few women that I saw who had their own business.
Mm-hmm.
And
what era? What we're talking about?
60s and early 70s, 60s into 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And in my first marriage, I was married to an Army officer, and a lot of the foreign wives always had some little import business or something going on the side, whereas the American wives didn't. But the foreign wives they were always hustling something or getting something going for themselves.
Right.
And I kind of envied them, but I really wasn't in the position at the time, or it didn't occur to me at the time that I could do the same thing. It took a while for it to sink in. So,
do you think that was an issue of confidence?
I think it was an issue just not even thinking about it, because
as being an option for you, because the picture wasn't very.
I knew that they did it. I saw that they did it. I also saw other things especially when I lived in Germany, that I did take advantage of, but at that time I didn't need the money, basically. I wasn't hungry. Maybe that's what it was.
Yes.
I wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
So in the early 80s, I was at a crossroads in my life and was ending a second marriage, and had come to the conclusion that maybe marriage wasn't a good option for me, because I was on number 2, and I had been going to college. I'd started going to college in Germany. I had all of the requirements out of the way. I could not figure out what profession I wanted to be. And any of the electives that I took were always literature related. Now that I look back on it, it's because at that particular time, that's whenever I wasn't reading a lot of fantasy. There wasn't as much bull floating around in the literature
Right,
world as there
right.
was in the real world. But and that's
Didn't
I
want to
think,
get lost in Harlequin romances and
no,
all
I
of that.
was reading good stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I couldn't figure out what profession I wanted to be in that, and I didn't think that I was a literature teacher, professor material.
Right.
And
because
it didn't
that
even appeal to me.
that was a real common profession for women to do. If they were going to work outside of the home, being a teacher was acceptable.
Yeah.
Secretary, receptionist.
And I don't have that particular gene. Some people do.
Or as a teacher, you mean?
As a to be nurturing a huge amount of people forever as a profession.
Yes. Okay.
So, my husband is a natural nurturer. He's got more nurturing in his little finger than I have in my whole body. So he's a natural nurturer. But I didn't have that. So so I was going to Loyola in New Orleans, and the professor said, don't tell the administration that I'm telling you this, but you don't necessarily need to go into a profession. You don't necessarily need to even get a degree to get out in the world and do what you were meant to do.
That was a powerful, and there was a male professor.
Yeah, I was a male professor.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yippee.
Because you were thinking that the college degree was going to be necessary for you to just do something on your own professional-wise.
Well, it gave me permission to say, that's it, I'm going out in the world and I'm going to make my living out of my own creativity.
Right.
Instead, and I could sink my teeth into that, having seen other, what few women I saw doing something out in the world business-wise, that I could do that. That was the most attractive thing to me. And so this happened in New Orleans, and New Orleans was a great place to cut your creative teeth. And, let's see, that was in 82, so in 83, word started getting out about the World Fair coming to New Orleans. And they started opening up these kiosks.
Do they still do that?
The World Fairs?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Because I remember
but
still...
I don't have the answer to that. But back
hey, if
then,
any of our listeners know, hey, send us a message on Facebook, in our Facebook group, if you know.
Facebook us.
Yes.
So, so I had started wholesaling my work, but there was an opportunity came about to open up a little small retail space in the French Quarter. And that's what I did for the World's Fair. It was really great. It was a wonderful learning experience. What I started off with was, I'm going to figure out how to do this. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to show up at my kiosk every day on time. I'm not going to be late, and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to consider myself in learning mode. And consequently, because I was consistent, I got put in the best locations because we had these little push carts that they pushed around.
Right.
And so they would put me in the best location because I was consistent.
Right.
And I was selling my work and other local artisans' work. And I did very well. But I think your initial question was something about what the kind of concerns about doing that?
Well, yeah. I mean, what motivated entrepreneurship rather than going and working for somebody else? What are some of the... What did you consider to be some of the benefits to entrepreneurship? And did you even recognize that there were some disadvantages to it at the same time when you were choosing them?
At the time, I wasn't thinking that it was entrepreneurship. I just thought that, when my marriage was breaking up, I had gone to the flea market in the French Quarter in New Orleans, and I had all this household stuff that I was selling, and I'm like, boy, if I just had more stuff, I could sell it. So maybe I can make some stuff and sell it.
Right.
So I got the bug to make stuff because then you have a bottomless pit.
Right.
If you can make stuff and sell it. So that
but of course, you still got to make stuff that people want to buy.
You do have to make stuff. Yes, it has to be sellable. So that's what I did. But It happened that I was at a crossroads in my life. The marriage was breaking up. The marriages were not working out for me, and I just
That
felt,
was not the career path for you.
But I felt like, well, I am just going to jump off of this cliff here with no net, because I've done it the way society expected me to in the past. It hasn't worked out.
Right.
It can't be any worse than it already has been.
I have absolutely nothing to lose at this point. Yeah.
Exactly. You have nothing to lose. Plus,
Yeah.
I was getting hungry then because I knew I was going to have to support myself.
Right.
And I was like, okay, learn to stand on your own 2 feet instead of depending upon marriage, because obviously marriage isn't working. And consider it an adventure, not a scary thing. Of course, it's scary, but you have to evaluate what's fearful about it. Is it because you've never done it? Is it because there's danger out there?
Right.
Is it an appropriate fear, or is it an inappropriate fear? So I figured it was an inappropriate fear. And so I didn't think of it at the time as being an entrepreneur. I just thought,
Well, that sexy word's only come into the American lexicon in the last, 20, 30 years that they've kind of brought that in. It used to be a business owner. Now it's gotten sexy with entrepreneurship. Yeah.
So I did really well in New Orleans. I
But
did
back up.
amazingly well.
So you had some great principles in regard to when you started. You know, you said, okay, I'm going to show up on time, be consistent. Is that something that was innate to you, or had you already learned?
I'm glad you asked that, because I had learned. Because in my college days, I was taking a biology class, and the professor was very intimidating to the class. And somehow, some way, students had gotten a hold of a copy of his final exam, and they were passing it around
Right.
prior to our final exam. And they offered it to me, and I'm like, no, don't think so.
Right.
And what I learned in that experience is the whole class was cheating, and I had chosen not to cheat, and I still got a B. And
Right.
he was grading on the curves,
Right.
and so I'm like, whoa, how many people really are out there cheating in the world? Because of the whole class,
Right.
practically the whole class was, and I'm like, I think it'd be an advantage if you don't cheat. You'll
Yeah.
learn more. So that's
You'll actually learn how to do it
You actually-
rather than
and
pretend that you know how to do it.
And your confidence builds
Yeah.
because of that. And so that principles of consistency and being there and being dependable. Also, I've tried to be as honest and as ethical as I could be, and that makes you stand out. Because that's not always the case, obviously.
Right. Being honorable in a world that can convince you that you have to be a cheater in order to be able to get ahead.
And that's what
Nice guys finish last, that
Yeah,
kind of thinking.
yeah. And so that was the basis of when I got started, and I can't tell you how much I have learned from it. All I can say is I would not be here now with the confidence and the ability to revive the station had I not built a foundation back in the early 80s
Right.
of consistency, being willing to learn, approaching it with a certain amount of joy,
Right.
and ethics,
And willingness to take a risk.
and being able to take a risk, understanding
Believing
that
in
there's
yourself
risk. Yeah.
enough that you're like, you know what, even if I take this risk and it doesn't work out the way that I think, I'm going to be all right anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to learn from it, because
Right.
that's when, if you put yourself on a learning path, which I think is a way to live life. I mean, I say sometimes I want to die with my boots on. I want to die still learning something new.
Right.
And I know that from my own experience that if a challenge comes up, I'll be able to figure out what to do.
Right. So if you are just catching us, you are listening to Yes You Can radio show with myself, Ann-Lee Waite, and my guest today is the executive director of the station, WPVM, Davyne Dial. Just a little announcement. Underwriter support for WPVM is made possible by the French Broad Food Co-op, a locally owned grocery store focusing more on people than profits by providing living wages, supporting local farmers and producers, and being community owned. More information is on the web at French Broad for Food. For co-op or food?
Food co-op.
Food.
That might be a typo.
And you see, I'm just reading along, and then afterwards my brain goes, that doesn't sound like it works there. So when I was nodding my head before, because you said something that when you first started your business or you started working, you kind of treated it a bit more like a hobby. And then when you had to live from it, that you had to get serious and focus. And I completely related to that because I consider myself to be an entrepreneur of 15 years. But honestly, the first 10 years, I didn't need the money. It was extra. So
Yeah, because I wasn't hungry. And until I
right.
got hungry.
When I got hungry, I got serious.
Hunger is a good thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't have hunger, you don't
Yeah.
you don't go at it 150%.
Yeah, and that was part of this huge growth curve that I've experienced here in Asheville is because when I got here, then I had to really start looking that this had to be something that was self-supporting, not just something that I really enjoyed. And the things that I used to say to myself before, because I'm basically introverted, so I feel drained in the midst of a lot of people. So the idea of marketing and promoting myself and being in the midst of all of these people wasn't comfortable for me. But guess what? When I got hungry, I went to marketing events and networking events. Right? So it was getting hungry pushed me to a degree that all the things that I believed in myself that limited my abilities to be an entrepreneur and being a business owner, it just didn't matter anymore because at that point I just didn't have anything to lose because I was hungry. Yeah. So
that's a real motivator.
I'm telling you. And then the other part about networking is that we have an expression in the Caribbean. We talk about egging people, like bothering people, calling and another message from, and that I wasn't supposed to, that wasn't good, that I shouldn't egg people. But guess what? When I was hungry, I called people, and they had to tell me a no. They had to make it very clear they didn't want it, or I was going to just keep calling, So were you a bit like that as well, too, that what were some of the things that was kind of like an undercurrent thing that you had to grow out of? Because there's a question that I had further down the road where, what was it? From your vantage point, do you feel that entrepreneurship is a gateway to self-discovery and not just a potential for self-determination? One of those things is that it's so much less about the money as it is about all the stuff that I have to learn for standing into my ability to say, I'm good at what I do,
Well, number one, whenever I got out in the world and started selling my work wholesale in the New Orleans area, I basically any shop that I approached, I guess I would choose the shops wisely because they would always order, they would always buy something,
right.
So that was good. And so that was kind of like the beginning, and then I knew that if I could sell shops in New Orleans, I could sell shops around the country. So I already.
Do you think that your products that you created sold themselves, or was it about you?
No, I'm a soft sell person. I want the product to sell itself. I don't want to ever, and I didn't then. I'd never wanted to be in the position where I had to do a hard sell and convince people. I mean,
Reads and
coaches. There weren't then.
Right, there weren't then. But I'm just saying that there weren't.
I didn't want to be putting myself in the position of having to convince people that they needed to buy what I was selling. I always liked I appreciated the honesty of, well, I really like this, and so here's the money. It's a very simple concept, but it's very honest. They either like it or they don't.
Right.
And so, and if they like it, they give you the money for it.
When you started your business, did you have an assumption of success? Did you just assume that you were going to be able to make it? Or do you think that that's an important quality in which to have?
When I first started, I had a little stash of money because from the first marriage I had bought wisely and had a good collection of things that were sellable.
Uh-huh.
So I had a stash of money from auctioning off my precious items from the first marriage that
Right.
I'd collected from traveling all over the United States and into Europe. So I started off with, well, I've got a little cushion here, so I'm just going to see what I can do. And it was basically, well, let me see what I can do. And I did just fine. But I kept my overhead low.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always have kept my overhead low, and I still do. With the station here, we keep the overhead low because it gives you a freedom that if you go in and overwhelm yourself with debt,
Right.
and you need a lot of money to keep the doors open, it's going to be much harder.
Right. Yeah. Hard to sleep at night, too.
Well, yeah.
Let me tell you. Yeah, hard to sleep at night, too.
Yes.
Yeah. So, 1989, you come up to Asheville.
Well, so I had done very well in New Orleans, and I had a nice little 2-bedroom apartment, or a living room and a bedroom, and a little work area. And that apartment was getting too small, and I felt like the next step up rent-wise was a mortgage payment. So I decided I was going to buy a house, and no female in my family had ever considered buying their own house before. But
Yeah.
I'm like,
And
that was-
unfortunately, we're in 2018, and there are still families where women, no female in that family owns a home. Yeah.
So that was kind of a daunting idea, but I'm like, I'm going to go for it. And so I came up here, and I was living in New Orleans, and let me tell you, the New Orleans summers are so grim on you that I was fantasizing about cool mountain nights, so that I would be guaranteed walking out of the house at 10 o'clock at night, and it was not going to be 120 degrees.
Yes, yes. With that
So-
humidity factor, yeah.
So they had a big convention in New Orleans in August of 1988, and decided I'm going to get out of town. I'm going to fly up there, and I'm going to see what the draw is, because I was feeling a draw up here. And so I
I think
was
you said you had some.
called.
Did you have some clients that were talking about it, or just people in
Well,
general?
like I would be selling to clients, like I would sell to a customer, and then I would ask them where they were from, and
Right.
kind of chit chat with them. And I always felt just green with envy whenever they were from the mountains. And I think it was that heat thing coming down on you all the time. But I came here. I got on I-26 in the rent-a-car and saw this stupefyingly beautiful countryside, and I'm absolutely smitten.
Right.
And so within 4 or 5 months, I had left the business that I had in New Orleans, the retail part of it, and had rented a truck and had my car attached to it, and I drove it up here and moved into this house that I put a down payment on.
So should we ascribe it as smartness on your part to come to Asheville already in a business where you brought your business with you?
That will
You brought your income earning
even
with
back then. Even back then, this was in the late '80s. People would say, "Well, if you're going there, you're going to have to take your own job with you." So that was.
Do you think that
common.
that's still the case here in
Well,
2018?
I haven't looked for a job here, so I don't know.
Right.
But I knew back then, and I know that the general conversation about the job situation here is that it's limited, and you really have to you have to know somebody, or you have service industry jobs and hospital industry jobs and government industry jobs, and there's and those are all what some people call low hanging fruit kind of job opportunities. So I think that it's probably still for the just ordinary person coming in, it's not that easy. And I know a lot of people with advanced degrees that are not able to
Earn a living, earn well. Yeah. Well,
that you could in Atlanta.
Right. With that same degree and knowledge and everything. Okay. That's interesting. A few weeks ago, someone, it was on Facebook, it was a comment, and I had shared in an interview about going to California when I was 40 years old and becoming certified as a yoga instructor and doing my Thai massage course and all of that. And the person complimented me about how great that was, that I was in my 40s, because she was now in her 40s and she was pursuing a yoga certification. And I thought it was really interesting and never really contemplated it before, because certainly in 2003, it never occurred to me that my age was an issue, that would be a reason why I couldn't start over again, you know. I thought maybe my abilities to be a good teacher, you know, to stand in front of people and instruct them on postures. I thought about all the other things that would be difficult about that work, but I never saw my age as being a factor. And I think that you're the same way. I mean, because when you moved up here in 89, you were in your 40s by that time? No? Coming up on it?
I think I was, let's see, 42. In 82, I was 40.
Okay. See, so
So I was 46 or 47.
Uh-huh. So did you even contemplate? Oh, Davyne, you might be too old for this. You might need to stay. Yeah.
It never occurred
On
to
your-
me that day. Never.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me. But I have longevity genes and I have really good health.
Right.
So I didn't feel constricted in any way.
Yeah, and last year I switched my focus, and at 54, and it didn't occur to me that I couldn't just start something new, you know, and I don't know anything about whether I have any longevity genes. I don't think so. My grandmother, she passed away in her 70s, in the late 70s, so I don't think I'm supposed to.
Well, I have done some genealogy research on my past, my ancestors, and in the 1700s, I had ancestors living into their 90s.
Really?
And my grandmother, when she died about 10 years ago, she was about to be 101, and she had smoked and worked in the mill.
Oh, really?
And ate all that fried Southern food, and didn't go to the doctor very much.
Right. Yeah, because in the 1700s you could die from a cold.
So I know from the history that I studied in genealogy that I've got another good 25 years.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, have you had any business failures?
I had business failure experience from my second marriage, and my husband at the time had commercial greenhouses. And from him and his inability to be a good business person, I saw and learned what not to do.
Really? And that tutorial was enough to guide you for, yeah?
Be consistent.
Yeah.
Show
up on time.
Show up on time. Don't be going over there drunk out of your mind. Trying to sell a truckload of plants to some nursery over in Alabama. Don't be doing that stuff. It's not going to work.
It makes for bad business practices.
Pay your water bill so that don't turn your water off. You can water your plants.
Oh my gosh.
Stuff like that.
I don't
That's
know.
how I learned.
I don't know if our listeners and those on Facebook are enjoying this conversation, but I certainly am. That sounds like a high school course in how to run your own business, though.
And
you
the
know?
funny thing was, he was a biology major, and he had been a high school teacher.
Oh, really?
Yes.
He wasn't a good high school learner, though, that's for sure.
You know what the attraction was? That he looked just like Chris Christopherson.
That's a reason to marry a man.
Well, I didn't say I was smart my whole life. But from that experience, I did smarten up. It's like, what were you thinking, girl?
Yes. Sometimes you have to go left just to know what center is. You know?
So I would say, what the learning experience was making a really bad second marriage error. That's enough, And
It put you into the master's program of life.
when you're young, you make these kinds of bad
Yeah,
decisions,
yeah.
and then you spend the rest of your life figuring out what in the world motivated me to do it that way.
Yeah. But doing it that way is the reason why you're here right now, you know?
Yeah, because I learned what not to do.
I'm a bit, harder on my head for some reason. I think I had to get into my 40s and start to get tired and go, we need to be doing something different.
Well, I had fallen back a little bit on my literature, and Dante was like halfway through life. You go through, you come to a reckoning. And so at 35, through the literature classes, I'm like, well, I'm at the halfway point in my life, and I need to start learning from these things instead of doing them.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. So you've had the station you've had the license for the station, you acquired the license with your husband. What motivated the acquisition of this license?
So there's a number of different elements that attracted us to becoming involved in independent media, starting with the public access station that was
Because you'd only been in
here.
retirement, 2 years?
Well, yeah.
You'd only been
Yeah.
retired 2 years.
Well, it was in 2012, yeah. So, but I was, so I was making jewelry, but I was just kind of putzing around, But my husband and I became acutely aware of the need for more independent media, partly due to Katrina, partly due to our experience at the public access TV station that was here for about 3 or 4 years, and becoming more aware that media, most 5 major corporations, media is owned by and controlled by
a handful.
a few big conglomerates, commercial media. And independent media was created in order to bring radio back to communities and be able to have programs like this where you can sit for an hour and talk and not worry that you're having to pay the show host whatever amount a commercial station is
and
paying.
you got to get that advertising department going so you can support it.
And so it was created that people with a love for the community and wanting to participate in something significant for the community could come in and be a part of, for example, be a part of our mission being to educate, inform, and foster dialogue about issues going on in the community. And my husband has a very philanthropic side. In the 90s, for 10 years, he was the highest donor to UNCA, the private donor, not business donor. So he had this propensity about him. And so when the station was about to close because the previous owner couldn't pay the bills, we met with them and said, well, what do we need to do? We met with their board. What do we need to do to be considered to receive the license, and we'll take over the financial responsibilities and basically revive the station, because it had been off the air for about 4 or 5 years.
Ah, okay.
So it had been, they had kept renewing a silent license. And so through their board voting to transfer the license to us, it happened that the FCC let the transfer go through in June of 2015. So that this June 28th is the 3rd year that we've held the license.
My.
And when we got the station, when we got the keys to the station,
Right.
so to speak, we had no idea what we were getting into.
Is it like buying somebody's storage facility? They don't let you see what's inside the storage facility. You just buy it and you take a chance?
Basically, yeah, that's a good analogy. Because we really didn't know what we were getting into, and people who had been involved there were some people who were not happy that our nonprofit was the one chosen to receive the license, and they had been running the station, and then because they weren't going to be able to be in control of it, they all got mad and left. So that really kind of left me with the radio station falling in my lap.
Right.
So this is what I tell people: the radio station just fell in my lap, and then I had to figure out how to run it.
Right. Because your involvement was just to acquire the license, and you just figured other people would be running with it. You just kind of oversee it.
We weren't foreseeing at the time whenever we met with them and their attorney and our attorney and came up with an agreement that we would be the ones that needed to be there all the time running the station. We didn't, at the time we didn't realize that, but things happened and we ended up having to.
Do you think you would have made a
figure
different decision if you had known that you were going to end up having to do the day-to-day
out-
management
that's a good
of?
question. It never occurred to us to not try to revive the station. And even if I'd have known all of the drama that was going to go on, I still would have done it. Since
Because it's a good choice for the community.
it's a challenge. It's a wonderful challenge. And it was just too much of a cookie to not bite into. It was because how could you not want to do it?
Right. Well,
If you're a technology person and you understand the need for the community for more relevant programming, I say to people when they're coming in to interview, I said, well, we want you to be authentic on the radio. Authenticity comes across, and we really want the station to be putting out either information or entertainment that's authentic and relevant.
Right. So I'm just going to share a little bit about how I ended up with a radio show here.
Okay.
Because people ask me every now and then, oh, how'd you get to a radio show, And I said, well, actually, I was a guest on somebody else's radio show. And then after I finished my interview, Davyne came in and we sat there and we talked for long past the radio show being on. And at the end of the conversation, she said, you should probably, consider having a radio show. And I told him about how I just kind of looked at you and went, I'm going to have to think about that. I didn't come in wanting to have a radio show or even thinking in terms of having the talent for that, But you saw something in that conversation that I did not see at all.
Well, you had a scintillating personality. And you were down to earth, and you had had a lot of life experiences, and you had a lot of wisdom to share. And we've had a problem getting women to come in and do programming. And
So if you're having issues of getting women to come in to do programming, that also means you got issues with women of color coming in to do programming as well.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I have found myself having invited quite a few, and not as many invitations are accepted. And but I do understand it in a way, you know. I was a guest on another radio show here in Asheville, and I'm authentic wherever it is that I go to, but put a microphone in front of me, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, people are listening. But I think you caught me at a great time because I had been practicing doing Facebook Lives. And Facebook Lives were the thing that helped to bring my comfort level to another degree so that I could do this, you know? So there are ways that you can practice that if it is a desire for you, if it is an interest for you to do a radio show or to even go on television, do some form of media, practice, get your phone, record yourself, you know, get through that sense of self-consciousness, because there are ways of you diminishing that so that you can get a greater success, I think, you know?
That, and you really have to have a story to tell, and whatever your topic and your subject matter is, it has to be a burning passion. So part of my learning here at who can do a show and do it well, the people that really work out well are people that are all into their subject. They eat and breathe and sleep it. And people like
And you
that
know, and you've got to know that it's a real passion because we don't get paid. We're doing this because we really enjoy doing this.
and you want to share it with the community.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you want to share it with the community, and you also want to be prepared, you know, so you do your little bit of research of however much that you need, but yeah, you're vested into it to show up on time. To be here so that you're not all a nervous wreck 3 minutes before you go on air to be yourself settled. You know, you got to be here and be prepared.
Plus
Show
you-
up, like you said.
Plus, you have to learn how to run all this stuff.
Yeah, that
That's
was
a challenge.
Yes, I mean, you mentioned just briefly your love of technology, and I'm like almost the complete opposite. Technology is a necessary evil. When it works really well, I'm so thrilled.
Me too.
I'm so thrilled.
But generally, when it doesn't work, I know what to do.
Yeah, right. I mean, I saw you with a toolkit and stuff. You should see her. I mean, I think, Davyne, you could have made a great plumber or electrician or any of those kind of things, you know?
Because in high school, they used to give us these aptitude tests, and I was supposed to be a mechanic.
Right. So for you, this station wasn't daunting from the technological
No.
standpoint at all. It would be for me. And it's been it's been this beautiful evolution for myself with me and this board. You know, to know that I can actually do this. Oh, and Facebook Live all together. I'm so proud of myself.
You should be, because what you're actually doing 3 jobs. You're interviewing. You're doing the interview.
Right.
You're working the equipment.
Right.
That's usually a producer's job. Plus, if you're doing Facebook Live, you're putting video out in the public.
Yeah.
So it's really, we ask a lot of our show hosts.
Right. But you get mad
but you
skills.
can do it. But we, actually, no one else is concentrating on doing Facebook Live from radio shows. No one else in town is doing it, I don't think. And so it elevates us a little that we're doing that.
Right.
And shows that bring community affairs and local artists. That's our mission to do, is to bring these things out to more and more to people in the community. And so it's happens on the radio, but the fact that we can also take advantage of making the reach go much further using social media is pretty phenomenal to be able to do. And I'm happy that we're able to do it.
Right. I mean, I do see that my life has been bringing me here to this point. You know, when I came up on the elevator the day that we had arranged to meet to talk about it a little bit more, I remember coming up in the elevator and hearing this voice saying, "You have a great voice for radio." And it's like it came out of the blue, and I know it was some past person. I looked at this computer astrological thing for myself. generated, a computer-generated astrological thing for me, for my sign, and radio was one of the things that they had as being potential professions, right? And at the time that I read it 10 years ago, I was like, psh, you know, psh, where am I? Radio? No, I don't think that's ever going to be happening, you know? And for me, the conversation is the most important thing. I just love the conversation that can open your eyes and where you can identify, and also, you know, you get this courage, you know, from somebody else's experience helps to give you some courage in your own life and how you can show up more broadly, really explore your life and all the talents that you have. You know, that's what I love about conversations with you and your story that attracted me to wanting to talk to you, is that you've just allowed your curiosity to just take you, you know, to just kind of follow it rather than allowing your fear to determine what you do.
You know, you touched on something, and my husband mentions this quite often, that he loves being around people who are intensely curious. And I have come to understand that that is a gift. It's not something that everyone has at
Right.
all. In my first marriage, we lived in Europe, and I was curious enough to travel all over Europe all by myself,
Right.
either on a wonderful train or driving myself, because the Americans always were able to get an international driver's license over there. And I was one of the few women who did that.
Yeah, who would dare to go off on your own.
And it was because I was curious. I wanted to go see the ruins, the Roman ruins around Trier, and look at the dig. I wanted to see what it looked like.
Right.
And I wanted to go to Florence and go to the Uffizi Museum and the Italian Riviera. So I was just, I understand it's a gift.
Yeah.
And I think partly part of the motivation for grabbing hold of the radio station is I feel that we all have gifts, and that it's our responsibility to develop those gifts. And part of my gifts are being able to do technology and maybe a few other things that relate to the station. But I've seen people in my own family die without developing the gifts,
Yeah.
and it's and I don't want that for myself.
Yeah.
So
Hey, it's too late for that to happen. Absolutely too late. If you're just joining us, this is WPVM 103.7 low power community radio. And this is Yes You Can. You can join us on our Facebook page if you'd like. It's WPVM 103.7 community radio featuring the arts and culture of Asheville. You can catch us live on Facebook. Let's do another message. Underwriter support for WPVM is made possible by Goodwill in Western North Carolina. Goodwill creates opportunities for people to enhance their lives through training, workforce development services, and collaboration with community organizations. More information on the web at Goodwill of Western North Carolina. I'm trying to figure out. So, what's the future? What do you see? Because you're really quite innovative, you know, just the bringing in of Facebook, the improvements that you've made to this to the station in regards to the technology and bringing it up to 2018 standards or getting close to. What's your future?
I would say that I don't quite know what is going to happen. Because to me that's part of the magic of the creative experience. Is whenever I was making things and selling them, you use good ingredients, just like with food, you use good ingredients and you put it all together, and you try to make a quality product, and then boom, the magic happens and people love the meal or they love the product that you've made. And basically my philosophy is the same thing here, is that we're working to put quality ingredients together, whether it's the equipment or the people that are here doing their shows. and then let the magic happen and see where we go there.
Well,
Because that's the spiritual side of it, is let the magic happen.
yeah. Well, and trusting. And trusting.
No, and well, I know from my past experience
Yeah.
that if you have quality ingredients,
It can't not turn out well.
it's going to turn out well.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to be. And trust me, back 30 years ago, whenever I decided I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what's going to happen here, but here I'm running a radio station because of decisions that I made then. So I would never have ever imagined that this would be something that came into my life.
Yeah, well.
And it's kind of magic.
Well, you're sitting across from somebody who's like feeling exactly the same way. I would have never have imagined that I would be sitting across from you having this conversation. Yeah,
But we
on a
are.
radio show. But yeah, here
It's
we are.
magical.
Yeah. So I would say that the theme of your life has not just been following your curiosity, but also believing in yourself. Going to the theme of this radio show, which is yes, you can.
I didn't start off with that. I started off with a very traditional, repressed Southern female that was supposed to get married and go have their kids and be safely ensconced and never ever come out of that little cubby hole.
That was a finishing school that you came from.
Yeah, that was a finish. And that just didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
So,
You see, I was fortunate I didn't have to get married to understand that. There's something in me that was so prevalent that went, no, don't do it, don't do it. Yeah. So, what a wonderful conversation.
well, thank you very much.
Do you know, I don't know if you know this, but you've become a mentor. I mean, I never asked you, that it was not been, it's not been officialized in any kind of a way, but I love any woman that, whatever her age, that exhibits a quality that I myself would like to have included in my personality. I consider to be a mentor. You
Well,
know?
thank you very much. That's so sweet of you.
No, but I mean-
because that's not something I would ever have assumed on my own. But to have you say that to me is I'm honored.
Yeah, I think that there is so much that is lacking in the development and self-development for women if you don't have a mentor, or if you've not attracted a few mentors, because one isn't necessarily supposed to fit you. It's kind of like a husband. It's not necessarily going to fit you all throughout your life, but to know that it can only enhance your experience and help you in your learning, you know?
Well, I in the past life, in my commercial life or my profession, I was a milliner, which is a fancy word for making fancy ladies' hats that you wore at weddings and derby and royal weddings.
Oh.
And there were
You think
none,
you could have a hat that could fit my head with all my hair?
well, you would have to have a topper.
Oh, okay. If you see us on Facebook Live, then you will understand why I asked that question. Okay,
Right.
sorry for the interruption.
So let me think.
You became a milliner.
Yeah, and well, I lost my train of thought there. But
At some point, you made a switch, because I remember you telling me that.
yeah. So I was so I did lessons, and I did lessons. When I videotaped the lessons, I did them coming from the perspective of when I started doing the fancy hats. I had no mentors to show me how.
Right. And there
that-
wasn't any YouTube still?
There wasn't any YouTube then, and the only place teaching it was the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, and I really didn't want to go to New York for a couple of years.
Right.
So the mentoring. So what I did was, when I got ready to videotape lessons, I thought, well, I want to be the kind of person that I would have liked to have found in these lessons, so that I have kind of like a mentor showing me what to do here.
Right.
So the mentoring is it probably is just as much of a concept as our mission statement, which is to foster dialogue and meaningful dialogue that creates a better world.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a few years ago, I formed a group and it was called Conversations That Matter. And that is the same sentiment, that it's conversations about things that will enhance, inspire, expand, illuminate, open up your mind to just a little bit, thinking of something from a different perspective, and how that can help to give you a much broader shift, you know?
Well, and that what you read in the beginning really ties right into that, what Maya Angelou had to say, and that you want to inspire getting out of survival mode and into really living and learning.
Yeah, because there are higher and higher states of living. There is, there's just the
Exactly.
basic, what is it, Maslow's
Theory.
his hierarchy. It makes so much of a difference when you're able to get out of that survival mode and really get in touch with how life can be so good,
Or challenging.
Well, I mean, it can be good in the challenge as well, too.
Yes. Yes.
I thank you, listeners, for joining us. I've had a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Davyne, for being my guest today and sharing more about your vision about this station and your life.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I don't get to be on the radio very much. Always behind the scenes.
Oh, have a great afternoon.
Happy Jack wasn't old, but he was a man.
You're listening to WPVM LP 103.7 Asheville.